So just to start, I'm curious how many people, just by show of hands, have been to an opera? Just raise your, okay, wow, fabulous. How many to an opera here in Memphis? Okay, so almost that many. How many of you would rather be beaten with bamboo rods than go to an opera? Yes, you are my people. You are who I'm here to talk to. Because for a very long time, I was just like you. So this is me in 1991 when my greatest dream was to be an actor. That's my actual headshot. Yes, that is my real hair. It's also the year, coincidentally, when I saw my first opera. It was La Boheme, one of the greatest operas of all time. I got a free ticket to a dress rehearsal while I was in college. I went, didn't really like it. I was sitting way in the back, didn't really know what was going on. I couldn't see the translations that they were projecting above the screen, so I couldn't follow anything, and I was kind of distracted. I had a lot of work to do the next day. So I figured, well, I didn't like it. I guess opera just isn't for me. 5 years later, I'd become a director. Thankfully, I realized that the last thing the world needed was another pretty good actor, even if he was taller than average. You can tell I'm now a director because I'm wearing a tie and tiny little glasses. I was working in that year at Hartford Stage Company for a man named Mark Lamos. I was his assistant director, and I also understudied every male role in every show they did that season, for which I got $150 a week. At the end of that season, he said, hey, why don't you come up with me for the summer, assist me on an opera? And I said, Mark, you know, I've never studied music. I don't read music. I don't speak Italian. I didn't even study Latin, so, you know, that doesn't help. I've only ever seen one opera, and I didn't really like it, so I think I'm a bad candidate for this job. He said, it pays 3 times what you're getting paid now. And I said, so tell me more about opera. Because after a year of $150 a week, I had debts. Now, I assumed that what I was in for was a sort of fun summer adventure with a world that looked like this. I figured I would buy a top hat, a monocle. I would spend a couple of weeks eating Grey Poupon straight from the jar. I would fit right in. Instead, I ended up at this fabulous place, Glimmer Glass Opera in Cooperstown, New York, where people happily wear cargo shorts and flip-flops to the opera, and nobody cares because the only thing that matters is great art on the stage. It doesn't matter who is sitting around you. It doesn't matter what they're wearing. None of that matters. So I was reintroduced to opera at the age of 26 in this wonderful place, and I fell in love. 5 years later, I only did opera. I didn't do theater at all anymore. And 20 years later, I run an opera company in Memphis. So clearly something changed. What I found most curious, though, is that even though I had seen one opera, I was filled with biases against opera. It was going to be long, it was going to be boring, it was going to be too loud, the singers wouldn't be able to act, everybody around me, top hats, monocles, the whole thing. But I'd only ever been to one, and it was nothing like that. So where did I get those ideas from? And I realized I'd spent my whole life watching movies and TV that show opera as the shorthand for something boring that you don't want to be at. I'd also watched enough depictions of one particular character that I'm guessing, as with most of you, if you close your eyes right now and I say the words opera singer, the image that pops into your mind is some variant of her, which is fascinating to me. The most fascinating thing, this is an actual Valkyrie. This is who that's making fun of. The most fascinating thing, and I'm sure there's a DMA thesis in here somewhere, is that those are feathers on her helmet, not horns like a Viking, because she's a Valkyrie. Somehow, these became horns. Our public image, our pop culture image of opera became this one thing, this one person. The reason for that is that this character is from Wagner's Ring Cycle, one of the most successful and most fantastic works of art in human history. It was so successful that it came to represent all of opera. Just like we don't internet search for something, we don't use facial tissues, and we don't put flexible bandages on our boo-boos. That one thing became the brand, which is a problem. Quick detour into the fat lady singing thing, because that also goes along with this. If you think about any physical activity, sports, singing is a very physical activity, there's always a physique that's going to give you some natural advantages. And if you sing for a living, You want to have big lungs because you want to be able to sing for a long time without having to take a breath. You want to have a big head because your nasal cavities, your sinuses, that's what gives you resonance. That's what allows you to be heard over an orchestra of 40, 50, 80 people sawing away on their instruments in an auditorium this size, twice the size, 3 times this size. That's your job. Those things help. Now, you don't need to have those things, but if you do have those things, you have a natural advantage, but you're probably a larger person than average. So that little guy could definitely have a career in the NBA, but he will never have the same natural advantage as the guy standing next to him. But the reason I took the detour is look at this woman. This woman is not fat. We live in a country where the average woman is a size 12 or a 14, but because we see TV and movies that are telling us that a pretty woman is a size 0 and her ugly friend is a size 2, or a size 0 who wears glasses and then you take them off and she's the prom queen. That's the world we live in. Opera shows people as they are. That's the amazing thing about it, one of many amazing things about it, because I wear a 52 long jacket and I fall in love and I fall into rages and I want vengeance on my enemies just like any other opera character. So that's just a very quick detour into how some of these biases got started, how some of these cliches got going. But that doesn't really answer the question of why so many people think opera sucks, even though they're not basing it on anything. And my theory is that a lot of it has to do with how we are told about the arts from a very young age. We're told that the arts are good for us. We're told that the arts are our vegetables, and as everybody knows, the vegetables are what you eat, so you get to the good stuff later. This is as far from the truth as anything could be. None of the arts are your vegetables. Opera certainly is not your vegetables. Opera is a fantastic bacon cheeseburger that when you bite into it, it's an intense sensual experience and the juices are dripping down and staining your shirt, and you do not care because that's how good a burger it is. That is the opera that I fell in love with 20 years ago. That's the opera that most people don't know even exists. Speaking of not knowing it exists, a lot of people will say, well, what is opera? What's the actual definition? Opera is just a story told with words and music working together. Opera singers live in a world where instead of talking to communicate, they sing. You'll say, that sounds a lot like musical theater. You're exactly right. What's the difference? There is none. Anybody who tells you there is wrong, and I'm happy to do another TED Talk next year about that because that's how long it would take to get into it. So that's what opera is, but opera is also more than that. When I was in college, I was told that television is about character. We come back week after week to see these people that we've fallen in love with. Movies are about plot. We want to see what's going to happen next in this 2-minute story that we're watching. And theater is about ideas. It's where we come together to wrestle with the big questions of our day. If all those are true, then it would be easy to say that opera is about emotion. However, it's about more than that, because really it's about empathy. Somebody else used that word just a couple of talks ago. Adding music to words allows those words to circumvent our biases, to circumvent our logic. It goes straight to the gut. It goes straight to the heart. We don't think about it. What we do instead is feel what the person singing is feeling. No matter when that person was born or what country they live in or when their story is set, we feel as a community what they are feeling. So opera exists at this intersection of music, words, and awesome. Michael, if you could join us on stage. Just to demonstrate what music does to words, I have in my hand the Wikipedia definition of a yo-yo. A yo-yo is a toy which in its simplest form is an object consisting of an axle connected to 2 discs. Michael, a little Puccini if you please. A yo-yo is a toy which in its simplest form is an object consisting of an axle connected to 2 discs and a length of string looped around the axle, similar to a slender spool. It's a very sad yo-yo. So how about some anger? Opera does anger really well. This is the Queen of the Night's Vengeance aria. is a toy which in its simplest form is an object consisting of an axle connected to 2 discs and a length of string looped around the axle similar to a slender spool. Thank you, Michael. So did I put some spin on those words? Absolutely. But the spin and the context all came from the music. So to give you an example of what we actually do, the tiniest slice of what we actually do, I've invited some of the singers we have working on 30 Days of Opera this year to come and help. Chelsea here is going to be singing a little tiny slice, a few lines of Pamina's aria from the Magic Flute. She is a young woman who has fallen in love with a man in Act 1. In Act 2, she is afraid that she has lost him forever. She will never see him again. He doesn't love her anymore, and she is desolate. It goes on like that. Thank you, Chelsea. So, the fact that she is a princess, the daughter of the Queen of the Night, and the guy who rescued her is a fairy tale prince, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that this is a story that was written hundreds of years ago with notes written hundreds of years ago. What opera does is allow us to feel what it feels like, or remind us what it feels like to think you have lost the person you love the most. Opera isn't always that serious. Chrissy, why don't you join us on stage, if you would? So Chrissy is just going to quickly sing an even shorter excerpt from Mozart's Marriage of Figaro, who also wrote Magic Flute. This is Cherubino. He's a 14-year-old boy who has just discovered what hormones are as they course through his body. Yes, that is a woman singing the role. That is an old opera tradition called a pants role. Often a boy whose voice might have just changed would be played by a woman.
Non so più cosa son, cosa faccio, or di fuoco ora son, ogni ghiaccio, ogni donna cangiar di colore, ogni donna mi fa palpitare, ogni donna mi fa palpitare, ogni donna mi fa palpitare.
So again, opera is able to capture what it feels like to have that blood racing through your body when you see a woman. Not even a pretty woman, any woman, because you're 14. That music, those words capture it perfectly. They allow us to feel what it feels like. So if anything I've said here is at all convincing, what I would encourage you to do is go out and see an opera. Go see one. We ingested a lot in little clips like we just did. Go see a full opera. And if you don't like it, you know what? Go see another one, and then another one. Go see 3, because nobody goes to see a movie and they don't like the very first movie they ever see and says, you know what? Movies just aren't for me. Yeah. Nobody does that. They do it with opera all the time. So go see a comic opera, go see a tragic opera, and go see an opera written in English in the past 20 years, or whatever your native language is. If you don't like any of those, you probably don't like opera. That's fine. God bless. There's a lot to do in Memphis. If you're worried about what to dress, there's only one rule. Nothing that will get you thrown out of a Bennigan's should be worn to the opera. Otherwise, dress up if you like or not. In closing, Dane, if you could come on. You'll recognize this number. When I think of the future of opera in Memphis and America, I am filled with optimism. I know we will win because we are an art form that brings people together to hear voices that connect us and remind us that the things that make us the same are far, far greater than the things that make us different, that are constantly being shoved down our throats by every other form of media. That is why we will win, and that is why we're going to sing about that.
Stelle, tramontate stelle, all'alba vincerò.